how the foreign markets work vis-a-vis how our market is functioning. And then again, since in terms of the consumption, there is a herd behavior too. So if a foreign brand becomes popular, consumers across the world, they compete to buy that foreign brand. For example, Apple phone. The moment Apple company launches a new phone, there will be lines before the Apple store, in front of the Apple stores, to buy that phone. And then there is a social status also that is attached to the kind of phone you are buying. Now this is the consumerism. So you consume without assessing your needs. So sometimes the consumption is not need based, but the consumption is influenced by the status, the societal status that you have, or sometimes it becomes a prestige point. Now in that case, such consumerism, the irrational consumerism, it harms the ethical aspect of it. So from consumers point of view also, there should be certain ethical standards that you follow. So there should not be too much of rush for buying certain brands, or maybe just because you want to consume luxurious goods, you keep on spending your money. That should not happen, because it creates harm for the environment. It also creates harm in terms of disturbance in the social sector, because the class, the income class that we have, and the consumption pattern, it gets completely disrupted due to consumerism. So consumerism, that is the tendency of consumers to buy certain things, that should be guided by the ethical standards, and CSR has the potential to change such irrational consumerism to ethical consumerism. Now I think for any country like India, which has aspirational population, this point is very very significant, because now with such emerging middle class and with increasing capacity to buy the foreign brands, now you will find that people are, you know most of the people have become prone to uh, the kind of shopping mentality, the shopaholicness. So everybody wants to buy certain things, everybody wants to buy new things without even checking whether I need it or not. So such unchecked consumerism, it is harmful. So that such unchecked irrational consumerism should be turned into the ethical consumerism, and CSR policy or CSR norms are definitely helping in that shift that we want, that is from unchecked irrational consumerism or unsustainable consumerism to ethical consumerism. That is why CSR is important. Secondly, I just mentioned the point that the corporate sector has to be sensitive towards the environmental changes also. But again, it is too much to expect from the corporate that they will change their output centric approach to environment centric approach, because there is opportunity cost, there is a shadow cost when the environment is taken care of. Because if your focus is on taking care of environment to maintain the stability, the environmental balance, then you make a sacrifice in terms of the output, because the output activity has got the environmental footprints, the carbon footprints. But so again, the corporate will have to make a choice. So if my priority is to expand my business, there will be harms in terms of environment. And if I take care of the environmental balance, then I make a sacrifice in terms of productivity, total output, then the profit, and so on. So one has to then balance the environmental cost of output and the total output, revenue and profit that you are earning. So therefore the corporate sector has to become little more sensitive towards the environment. And by pushing the corporate sector to work for the social purpose, or social sustainability, environmental sustainability is an aspect related to that. So therefore here, environment, which is a important part of our individual as well as the social life, the sensitivity towards environmental issues is a must. It has to be there amongst all the stakeholders, and corporate sector cannot be the exception to that. Therefore environmental sustainability also comes out of the CSR initiatives that we have. So overall there is an awareness about how do we maintain the balance while working for output as a corporate. Fine. So environmental sustainability or sensitivity is rather the outcome, or it is instrumental in pushing the CSR agenda. Lastly, it is socially responsible investment or socially responsible investing. For business sector, investment is like bread and butter. So without investments, the corporate sector cannot survive, it cannot exist. So that investments and the continuous investment cycle is very very important for the business, the corporate sector. But then such investment here should not only um, revolve around the profit driven aspect, or it should not be always profit driven, but rather it should be socially responsible. So you one has to then examine how and where we are investing, and what will be the repercussions of such investment when it comes to the social health, right? So social stability, the social cost, social risks, and so on. Because again, when you are working in the society, you have no other option but to accept the social structure that is given to you. And no individual or no individual corporate unit can completely change the society in order to get its benefits. So if the social structure and the social barriers and so on, if they are going to be there and you have to work within that framework, then you have to invest in a much more responsible manner, so that the social balance is not disturbed, it is not really disrupted. So that is why socially sensitive, socially responsible, environmentally sustainable or sensitive, and ethically strong, such kind of behavior is expected from the corporate sector, and it is possible by pushing the agenda of CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, right? So this is the overall conceptual framework for the CSR norms. But now, as we have seen, CSR is a universal concept, so it is applied everywhere. But in the context of India, it is so special because the CSR norm with respect to India, or in Indian context, it is a mandatory norm. Other countries, CSR is voluntary, it is optional. But in case of India, for every profit making corporate unit, CSR is compulsory, right? So there has to be annual report of CSR that has to be generated, which will compare the CSR cost, that is which area you have worked in, and what is the benefit, the tangible as well as intangible benefits of the CSR initiative. And that has to be done by every profit earning corporate in India. And the assessment of those reports, that is done by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So that is how there is a legal system, and there are legal norms related to CSR only in India. In other countries, that is just an optional or a kind of voluntary action that CSR, the corporates can engage with. So that there's a difference in how India executes CSR vis-a-vis the other countries, how they execute the CSR policy. Okay, now coming to more of the philosophical aspect of such CSR, corporate social responsibility, there are some aspects associated with that. So if you are able to see such pyramid like structure on the screen, you will find that the corporates here, uh, again, if you believe in the point that the corporate sector also has its own responsibilities, duties, and from morality point of view, a certain type of behavior is expected from them, then there are four different dimensions of the responsible business sector or ethical activities that the corporate should engage with. So what are those different dimensions of responsibilities for the corporate sector? First is economic responsibility. So since they are incorporating all the factors of production for the business purpose, of course there are lot many economic parameters which they have to satisfy, which they have to work with. So then there is economic responsibility. For example, if you have hired the labor force for the production activity, obviously you have to pay them as per their productivity. So this is a kind of norm that applies in the business sector, which has economic dimension. So you have to cover the cost first, the remaining remains with you, that is the profit, right? But then since you only want to earn profit, You cannot make people sacrifice that they are not paid well. Fine, so that should not happen, and it is the economic responsibility of every firm that you bear the cost of production first. Once you earn the revenue, they you have to distribute that revenue amongst all the factors, like capital or labor force and so on, and all these factors of production should be paid well. Now that is the ethical dimension of the business responsibility, and normally it is a very regular kind of action that they have to undertake. So they will bear the cost and there will be revenue. Sometimes there is profit, sometimes it is not. So it's very common thing. But then beyond that, beyond the regular functions of the corporate, there are legal as well as ethical responsibilities also. So if at all, while having your SOP, that is standard operation procedure, when such standard operations are going on, sometimes there are conflicts, right? Because all the stakeholders, it is too much to expect that they will behave honestly or judiciously. So, certain legal conflicts or legal matters, they emerge, so that there has to be unbiased and impartial approach to look at the people when you follow the legal norms related to your business. So legal responsibility every firm will have. Now beyond that, beyond the regular economic and the legal responsibility, the corporates are also responsible in ethical manner. So they have to behave in the most ethical way that they can think of, and also they should be engaged with the ethical practices. And beyond that, they should also work for the humanity at large, which is the philanthropic approach. And such philanthropic responsibility is the origin of the corporate social responsibility. So what is the genesis of this particular issue? What is the origin of this issue? It doesn't lie in the broad base of economic responsibility or legal responsibility, but the CSR, at least in the context of India, it refers to the philanthropic and the ethical approach or ethical dimension of the corporate behavior. Similarly, wherever such CSR is practiced, it is basically the corporate's philanthropic approach that helps, because it is the very origin of that CSR concept. So, therefore, this pyramid like structure describes the way in which corporates should behave from economic point of view, legal, ethical, and the philanthropic point of view. And that is how, when the corporates behave in this manner, they create good reputation in the market, and they also improve their stakeholder management, the relationship, industrial relationships, and that is how their outreach also increases. So that is how the CSR norms, in at least in the context of India, they have their origin in such ethical and the philanthropic kind of dimension. And now, apart from the emergence of this concept, which has origin in such moral philosophy, this concept here, it has got various practical dimensions also. Because once it was thought that let us make it an official practice, let us incorporate CSR in our legal framework. When those attempts were made, the policy makers realized that there are many challenges that we are going to face. So then we need to lay down the foundation of the CSR policy as official policy or legal policy. What will be the nitty gritties? What will be the exact things or exact uh, procedural norms that we have to lay down for the corporates to follow, right? So now, when the CSR initiative was introduced in India, uh, we with the parliamentary resolution, we made certain amendments in the Companies Act. So as per the 135th section of the Companies Act 2013, uh, we started applying the CSR norms for the companies. But when the companies were identified, there were certain parameters for that. So companies which fulfill the criteria, and there are three criteria, those companies, for them it is mandatory to apply the CSR policy. So what are the three criteria here? First is, the companies which will have 500 crore or more than that of the net worth. So the company's net worth in the market should be at least 500 crores or more than that to become eligible for the CSR policy. Secondly, If not net worth, if you don't fit into the net worth criteria, then the second one is that if the company has got annual turnover of more than 1,000 crores or 1,000 crores, those companies are also, they are also eligible for the CSR initiative. So for them, it becomes an obligation now. And also the companies which have net profit of 5 crore or more than that annually, those companies, for them the CSR is mandatory. Now it is also said that the eligible companies are required to spend at least 2% of their net profit for the immediately preceding 3 financial years on any CSR activity. So once your profit amount is, that fits into this particular criteria, that your net profit is either 5 crore or more than that, or if your annual turnover is greater than 1,000 crores, or if your net worth in the market is more than 500 crores, then at least 2% of that has to be spent on the CSR initiative for the preceding next 3 financial years. So that is how we have a considerable amount of time for which the CSR funding happens, and that is how you can create some kind of a concrete work for the social benefit, for the social cause. Because if it says that annual turnover is 1,000 crores, then for that financial year only you will have CSR initiative. Next year, if your annual turnover goes down, then the CSR will discontinue. Now if that kind of fluctuation happens in case of the CSR initiative, then we cannot have any concrete change or some kind of concrete action under CSR. So it was made mandatory that not only for one financial year you have to create such initiative, but rather the financial year in which you earn that much of profit or annual turnover, then for next 3 financial years you have to continue doing that. No matter what happens to your net profit, it may go down or up, but for any financial year, if you hit that target, that your annual turnover is 1,000 crores, then CSR is mandatory for you. Then you can't say no, because there are legalities involved in that. So 2% of the average net profit will be applied for the CSR initiative. And as far as the fiscal policy, the taxation policy is concerned, no specific tax exemptions have been extended to CSR expenditure per se. Now, I just hope that all of you are aware that as far as the taxation policy is concerned, for charity or for social work, under the income tax rule 80D, there are concessions. So then if you are engaged with some social activity, some social work kind of thing, then the donations or charity for such institutions, uh, that is exempted from the tax, fine. So that when people file their tax returns, if there is expenditure or some donation for the social cause, the tax is exempted and there is a waiver. So it was expected from companies point of view that if they spend 2% of the net worth of profit on CSR initiative, they should get some concession in the corporate tax. But that is not the case, because the point is, once the tax policy changes, it will have to change for all companies which don't follow these criteria for CSR, which means that we are creating a kind of imbalance when the CSR initiatives are following the tax principle, so that the companies which have such mandatory CSR, for them there is no tax exemption at all. So you have to continue your CSR initiative without making any change or without really tampering the tax amount that you have to pay to the government. So no concession in the corporate tax, either direct or indirect tax, when the CSR amount is spent for. So that is about the legal or maybe the mandatory guidelines under the CSR policy that we have. And it is also possible to state or identify some of the areas in which the CSR initiatives have been undertaken by different companies. Since the tenure of implementing CSR policy is now more than 10 years, after a decade, if you see the areas in which companies work, I think it is again for the better social cause. So promotion of education at large, then eradication of extreme hunger and poverty, then gender equality and women empowerment, then combating the diseases like HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, that comes under the health initiative. Then the CSR can be used for environmental sustainability, then social business projects, and contribution to PM's relief fund. So these are the areas in which so far the CSR initiative or CSR funding has taken place. And apart from this, once you then look at the geographical location, most of the CSR initiatives are funding the rural activities as well, so that in rural areas the irrigation projects, or maybe providing electricity supply 24 by 7, or giving the aid to the physical infrastructure in rural areas, like building the local roads, or maybe providing access to market from your village place. These are some of the areas in which the CSR funding has taken place. Some of the CSR initiatives are very effective in terms of providing access to health. So there are small hospitals, private hospitals, that are established by using the CSR funding. There is an ambulance service also that you can provide. So this way, in especially in areas like education, health, rural practices or rural infrastructure, then for women's health, children health, so in all these areas the CSR funding has taken place so far. And some of the companies have they have collaborated such activities with the local NGOs. I think now when more and more people join hands, then the work becomes more effective, because then you have many stakeholders working for the same cause. So wherever the CSR funding is in collaboration with the NGO work, there is better understanding of the problem and better work to solve the problem too. That is why collaboration of industry and NGOs has been very effective at many places in India. So, therefore, the coverage of CSR should not be limited to these areas, but it should be also beyond the rural cases, or maybe the infrastructure related issues or environment and healthcare. It should go beyond that. Now, here, if you are looking at the screen, you will find that there are three different YouTube video links. One of them is just explaining how we execute the CSR in the context of India, and it also explains you the history of CSR. So how the Gandhian concept of trusteeship is at the core, and it is the origin of the CSR policy in India. Then what is the CSR amount that these different areas have received so far, and in future how we want to strengthen the CSR policy for having better social change. So that is the overall introductory video that will explain you India's case and how India implements the CSR policy. The other two are the case studies. I remember in the previous class somebody asked about the case study. So here the last two YouTube video links, they describe how the CSR initiative can completely change people's life. So one of them is about the CSR funding of Capgemini to provide access to education to the Dalit girls, right? So people, those who are socially backward, those families, those who do not afford their girl children to go to school, Capgemini and its CSR activity, especially in the southern part of the country, has been doing a wonderful job. So Dalit girls, those who belong to the downtrodden strata, and those who otherwise do not have access to any of the resources, how the Capgemini CSR funding has created a wonderful structure, infrastructure for such Dalit girls. That is a very heart touching documentary, a very small video, but that explains well the effectiveness of CSR funding for such unattended problems. So, neither society nor the government has paid attention to such issues where the people from the socially backward classes and their problems, like how the Dalit girls will get the access to education if their own families do not support them. So that is how such CSR case studies, they are really showing us that to what extent we can make it effective, and how do we strengthen the social network by funding such activities. The other video is about Seva, which is an NGO rather, which is working in Gujarat. So then for uh, women empowerment in Gujarat, when they join hands with institutions like Amul, which is the cooperative dairy kind of farming, and when these women were involved in some small scale industry, the household industry, how they run their household business, and if they connect with each other, and if a company is funding their activities through CSR by application of the high end technology, it can create wonders. So the other YouTube video is about women empowerment, and when women in the families are empowered economically, that will have a greater multiplier effect. So these two are wonderful case studies that will show you the effectiveness of CSR funding in such areas where the society has failed and even the government has failed to address the issues. So if you then have a look at all the three documentaries, you will find that the CSR here is very, very significant, and it plays a very crucial role, at least for those people who do not have any access otherwise. So those who have lack of opportunity, lack of income, and lack of access to the resources like infrastructure, for them CSR is really a helping hand. So I would urge you, I would rather appeal you to watch these three videos. It's very informative and also heart touching. So now coming to the other aspects of CSR funding and the CSR activities in India, it's about the CSR journey. So far I've been telling you that in the context of India, CSR has become a legal norm now, so it is mandatory. Otherwise it is considered as a punishable offense. So how exactly we have reached this point, how exactly we have pushed the CSR agenda, and what is the current status of corporate social responsibility in the context of India. So the CSR journey in India and its key milestones are mentioned here. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, the very origin of this concept is in Gandhi's concept of trusteeship. So the corporates are not only generating wealth, so they are not only wealth creators, but they are the caretakers of the social assets, the national assets that we have, which are which should be ideally owned by the public. So that when you are representing the wealth creator class, you should behave in the manner in such a manner that you are only the trustees of those assets. So from that idea, from that very liberal kind of idea, when we have reached the point where the CSR has become mandatory, how that journey was, and how we how we made it possible to make it the legal norm in the country. So what are the CSR milestones? So the journey from its legal point of view, it started in 2009 when the corporate voluntary guidelines were released to encourage the corporates to achieve to voluntarily achieve the high standards of corporate governance. So first it was considered as the matter of the corporate governance, but then later it has crossed the boundary of corporate governance and its social outreach has expanded. So later there were many organizations talking, discussing, and debating about the CSR, like the Human Rights Commission, or it was also discussed at the forums of United Nations, then World Bank, WTO, and so on. So all such international organizations were also discussing about CSR, and then from there we got the inspiration or the point to make it more sophisticated, modern, and also that will fit into the context of Indian society. So then with the overall attempt to discuss CSR as a policy program, Then at national level, certain guidelines were issued in the context of business responsibility, the corporate responsibility, and based on the national voluntary guidelines on social, environmental, and economic responsibilities, they were related to mainstream the very concept that happened in 2011. Then the market regulator, that is SEBI, mandated top 100 companies to sort of fill the business responsibility report, because if companies manage the CSR and the ground reality does not change, it means that the CSR funding is wasteful, and it is not really worth of doing or worth of engaging with. So that the at the policy level, it was determined that let's have an assessment of the CSR activity that the companies are engaged with. So unless and until the report is assessed, we will never come to know to what extent the CSR has been effective. That is why now SEBI in 2012, SEBI made it mandatory that the CSR activities should be reported, and the business responsibility report are based on whatever kind of work. It can be environment related or social cause. For any work that you are doing, such report should be documented and it should be submitted. And finally, after all such attempts, there was enactment of Companies Act 2013, in which the CSR was made as a mandatory thing. So as I mentioned that in 2014, according to section 135 of this Companies Act, the CSR came into existence. So it was enforced in 2014, and it was then compulsory for all the corporates having a turnover beyond 1000 per year, or maybe the net profit of the company which is more than 5 crores. So accordingly, it became a compulsory matter for the companies to sort of implement. Then in 2015 there was high level committee on this CSR, and they recommended the framework of CSR and the stakeholder concerns and so on. SEBI played a very significant role for the companies who submit their CSR report, etc. In 2018 also, many changes took place with respect to the execution of CSR. There were many stakeholders and even the involvement of the government different secretaries, like environmental department secretary or the corporate affairs ministry ka secretary. All of them joined hands to make it a proper legal policy framework. And in 2019, the national guidelines on the responsible business conduct, they were released. And today, if you look at the current scenario with respect to CSR, the 2019 guidelines are in practice. So the CSR is implemented or executed in India according to the 2019 guidelines, which are mandatory for the companies, those who are engaging themselves with the CSR activities, and that is how they are funding it. So this is overall structure and the journey of corporate social responsibility in India, and its alliance, or maybe how we connect the CSR with the business ethics and business responsibility of the stakeholders in Indian society. So uh, I think this way we have introduced ourselves to what the CSR is all about, how we execute that policy in India, which is so special because no other country in the world has made CSR a mandatory norm. It's only optional. So those who really follow the principles of philanthropic dimension, they implement it voluntarily, but it's not compulsory as such. But in the context of India, this CSR is compulsory, and that is how we are trying to pay attention to the bottom of the pyramid. So it is the social pyramid, in case of which the people at the bottom, they are largely at disadvantage. So since they don't have equal access to the resources, and they always have to struggle for every minute thing they want, somebody has to then work for them, those people, or somebody has to work for their cause. So I think here the role of CSR is very very crucial. And then looking at how the CSR funding is helping the rural projects and even for the women empowerment, I think it's a very good instrument, a good tool to use for a better social change, to change the ground reality. So this is about corporate social responsibility, which is instrumental in maintaining the stakeholder relations, to expand the business, to increase its outreach, and also to build good reputation in the market in the eyes of the consumers. So this is what I wanted to discuss about the corporate social responsibility. So I think I was able to give the message in terms of how we implement this kind of a policy. So this is all for today.
Yeah. Any questions? Shivangi or Ibu sir, you want to ask?
I'm sorry I was a bit late. I do apologize for this.
No, ma'am, I don't have any questions.
But I remember in the last class, Ribu sir has asked me to talk about some case studies. So today I tried to incorporate that. So go through the YouTube videos. You will get to know some case studies pertaining to the CSR initiatives, especially in the rural parts of the country.
One question I wanted to ask, ma'am, was
Sure, sure.
how effective do you think uh, CSR is applied? I mean, when it comes to the government setting the rule book, but when it comes to the reality of applying these principles, what is your perspective or thought? I mean, do you feel that it's being fully applied and
Um, I have basically two answers to this question. One is, as an idea, that is in principle, CSR framework in India is very very ideal, and it rather tries to follow the social challenges, and also it incorporates the social needs. It takes into account the social needs that we have, and the responsibility of CSR funding is on the shoulder of the companies who are, who are fit into that criteria, like net worth, profit, and so on. So looking at the large industrial base in our country, how many companies are eligible for CSR funding? That is one question for assessment. Secondly, how many of them truly work for the cause? Because many a times, there are cases that I have heard that companies just manage CSR, so it's about writing a report rather than working on the field, right? So there are very few companies those who consider this as a genuine practice. So the approach here is never enthusiastic, like we should truly follow the CSR norms. No, since it is mandatory, people are like, they are reluctant to really work for such cause. So there is no voluntary action taken for that, but rather involuntarily people only try to see that the CSR is managed somehow, and they submit the report to the authority, so that they will only show how we have completed that, but it's never a genuine work that is done. So in principle, it's a good policy. It's, and if it is widely applied honestly by everyone, we will definitely have a larger kind of mass that is benefited from this. But unfortunately that doesn't happen. So, do we really follow that philanthropic dimension of CSR practices at large? My answer is no. It's because of the reluctance and that reluctant approach of businesses to apply the policy. And it's not only the case that only companies in manufacturing sector have to do that. Even it should be implemented by the educational institutions like us too. So a part of our turnover should be used for some social cause. So it should be considered as an umbrella framework wherein all stakeholders will be able to join the hands. So that is what I feel about the effectiveness of CSR looking at the current practices.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Ma'am, I just wanted to ask
Yes.
whether some study has been done
Hmm.
that how many companies are involved, or this particular initiative is really, really applicable, fruitful in the
Hmm.
field of education or health. Any such study where we can see the growth or how slowly companies willingly are doing?
Again, I would answer in two part this question also. One is the consolidated report of all CSR funding at national level. It is SEBI's and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs responsibility to submit such report, so that the data will be available, that is pan India. Okay, so there is annual report submitted by SEBI and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. It is available in the public domain. That is one thing. But secondly, sector wise, like which sectors and the areas that are getting the CSR benefit, that sector wise analysis, I think it's not that strong. Because then how many people are really benefited, and the CSR that exactly goes into education, women health, that sectoral analysis is not very strongly described in that report. So again, the consolidated report is just an executive summary of the report submitted by each company to SEBI and the ministry. But then out of that, some in-depth analysis has to be done to examine whether it is effective or not. But I don't think these guys take that job seriously. So in terms of documentation, report is given, but whether that report gives us some important insights, I don't think that is going to happen.
That is true because somebody's
Yeah.
PhD or some way where people are spending more on health or they are spending more on education, rural
Mm-hmm.
development, so that we have some
Yeah.
percentage wise report. That must be a gross one. No,
Yeah,
impact
yeah, that is
study
consolidated. Huh.
consolidate. Yeah.
Yeah. But then individual researchers might have done some doctoral research work or postdoc research work on CSR. Maybe on Shodh Ganga or InflibNet, we may get some information related to that.
Correct, correct,
Yeah,
correct, correct, correct.
I'll have to check.
Huh. No, I was just understanding since 10 years have passed, there has
Yeah.
to be some
Yes,
result.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, some
that is right.
examination like to what extent it is
Yeah.
effective. Yeah, true.
And sometimes the government only initiates such studies, that they give it to some
Yes,
institute.
yes, yes.
That's, yeah. Thank you very much for this
Yes.
wonderful deliberation. Really, I
Thank you.
enjoyed listening how it is associated to ethical and legal and philanthropic approach because a person may do, a person may not do,
Yeah,
willingly, unwillingly.
unwillingly.
Yeah,
True, true.
yeah.
But then some people in India like Tatas and Infosys, etc. Right? I mean, since inception, they have been doing that. So
Yes,
for them,
yes,
it's not new. But for companies, those who
absolutely.
enter that domain of high net worth and all, they may not be truly enthusiastic about it.
Possible, possible. Because even I remember Mahinder and Mahinder used to offer
Yes.
fellowships to Heras Institute.
Oh, through their CSR?
Yeah. No, it was not
Yeah.
CSR, just their
Uh-huh.
company
Just
long
as.
ago, long ago. Before this scheme came, they
Hmm.
used to offer us fellowships
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
PhD scholars and to do minor research in history.
Hmm. Some of our students, those who have gone abroad for education, have got Tata scholarship
Yes.
through their CSR initiatives. So I
Right,
think
right.
Tata is such a business house that has its CSR truly widespread. I mean, no sector in India is really untouched. But every sector they have their presence either through CSR or maybe their regular business functions, but they
Yeah.
are like omnipresent.
Absolutely. We got Tata
Yeah,
funding
yeah.
for our
Our
museum
college.
also.
Yeah. Yeah, it was overall college ka grant, but
Yeah,
then
yes, yes,
Heras also
yes.
got something out of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. Because otherwise, we don't generate any income as such.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I
Thank you
enjoyed
very
the
much.
sessions. Thank you everyone for
Thank you.
cooperation and giving this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
students
you.
for patiently listening to all my lectures. I hope it has provided you certain insights to take your studies forward.
Definitely. And others, I feel that they were all in corporate sector. That's why they have not attended because they may be
Oh, they
knowing all
know
this.
about it.
Yeah. That is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
okay,
you.
no
Thank
problem.
you.
Yes, thank you.